Dobar večer. Dobar večer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our roundtable about art magazines. I'm happy that we all gathered here today. I sort of really needed this conversation after today when I asked the ChatGPT how would they make an arts magazine. And they, of course, had an answer. And they said, and I will read this out for you. First, diversify revenue streams. Second, build a loyal community. Third, collaborate with artists and galleries. But they didn't mean like as in terms of long reads and so on, but more like commercial sort of a deal. Offer advertising and sponsorship packages. Explore digital opportunities. Seek grants and sponsorships. Establish strategic partnerships. Monitor and adapt. And I think like what I've read has nothing to do with what I had in mind when I started editing, and I think none of us did. And I hope we will be able to have a discussion that will go beyond what ChatGPT has to offer. Here with me today are the editor of ETC magazine, Hana Čeferin, the editor of Šum magazine, Tjaša Pogačar, the editor of Blok, Zazenski, the editors of Kajet, Petrică, Mogoș, and Naum, and the editor of Artforum, Sutton. Welcome. And I will start with a basic question, which is, can you give us an elevator speech about the mission of your magazine and your vision as an editor? And I will start with you two, because it's the two of you, and...
Elevator pitch. Okay, but first of all, I think we have to start by thanking you for creating this context. I think it's important that these kind of intersections and opportunities for people who are into publishing, whether they are in the art sector or beyond, get to meet each other. I think that's, to us, the most important part of our trip here, that we get to maybe network on this kind of transnational, horizontal level. And about our magazine that we've been doing for the past 6 years, I think? 6 years. So what we try to do with it, Kajet, which is this journal of Eastern European encounters, as we call it, we try to provide some kind of critical mapping, but also understanding of what this very blurry and murky and complicated notion of Eastern European identity or Eastern Europe even means. So how can we even deal with such a highly contested and rightly so idea? So I would say that we try to maybe go beyond the purely geographical understanding of it. For some, there is east of Berlin up until the Caspic Sea or the Caucasian Mountains. To others, there is Mitteleuropa. Well, what if maybe Eastern Europe does not even exist? What if it's just this kind of the product of or a figment of the Cold War imagination? So we're trying to maybe constantly with each issue map these thoughts, these kind of challenges that come at us via communities, utopia, struggle, periphery, future. So these are the kind of topics that we try to unpack with each issue. I think I've taken already too much. Maybe Laura, if you want to add something. Oh,
thank you. Hello? Yeah, okay. I also want to second the thanks for inviting us and presenting this panel, for hosting us. And just to let you know as well that Blok is not a print magazine. We only exist online, and it has always been the case for Blok, so that's why we're not here in front of you. But that being said, Blok was founded in 2018, and since then we've had a few shifts in our editorial team and structure, and the mission as well has been refined for the past about 2 years. We've always been an English language magazine covering, as Petrică said, this kind of quote-unquote Eastern Central European region, whatever this may mean, as it fluctuates. So within this, we cover art, culture, politics of the region in the English language, and as well, we have an editorial policy of minimal intervention to kind of honor the way that English is used throughout the world. So that's just an additional important policy for us when we review, when we process our articles. Thanks.
Hi, from my side as well, and also thank you at this point to all of you for coming here and talking to us. And to speak shortly about ETC, that's a magazine that was kind of a COVID baby. It was born in 2021 and it's been going on for 2 years now. We issue one magazine per year. It's always a showcase magazine, so we dedicate it to a certain topic. And then the idea was kind of to create almost an exhibition of sorts inside of the magazine. So a big part of it is a portfolio section dedicated to the presentations of different artists, artists that we include from the Baltics to the Balkans, as we say in our tagline. And to touch briefly upon why the magazine was founded is very much in connection to what you, Katie, and you, Petrică, were saying already, which is that we felt that the space in which art in Slovenia and the way that it connected to the international space was very much undefined. So we kind of felt that we couldn't connect with Eastern European magazines, for example, who had a very strong foundation that we knew of, but we were never kind of a part of. And so we felt that we needed to create something new that would be able to connect to just different places and explore where we can even fit in. And then the second part was that it needed to be in English so that we could have this basis built for starting communication.
So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming out on such a gorgeous day outside. I think I'm speaking from a slightly different perspective on this panel because my colleagues here are all building new things and building new institutions, whereas my role at Artforum is more figuring out how we handle the advantages and the baggage that comes with a 61-year-old magazine. So my role at Artforum is the international editor. When Artforum was first founded, it was actually founded in San Francisco as a way to show that there's a conversation happening in the States around art that wasn't exclusively confined to New York. Now, 60 years later, we're in a different position where so much of my role is trying to push that conversation outside of New York, to break free of, and expand where we're looking, expand who we're talking to. And honestly, that work couldn't be possible without your efforts, because so much of what I do as an editor is read through what is being produced on more regional or local levels to try and find what are the conversations that we're not listening to, what are the conversations and in what languages, and who are the writers. So yeah, I'm really happy to actually meet some of you in person now.
Hi, thanks for having Shum at this panel, because Shum is not the usual art magazine, at least as how we usually imagine it. We don't publish reviews of exhibitions or interviews with artists, or mostly we don't even publish texts about art, really. So what Shum does is basically publishing texts that don't write about art, but with or alongside it. So it's more of a project or a platform even that somehow connects with the art field, either through people that are involved with the platform itself or through specific projects that are somehow important for the editorial focus of the magazine, of the journal. mentioning the editorial focus, I also should mention that the editorial team, that this focus is very much influenced by the research interests of people that are part of the editorial team at a certain point in time. The team changed a lot since the beginning of Shum. It was established in 2013, so it's like the next issue is our 20th issue, and it started as a grew out of a self-organized activity, basically. So somehow it is also a tool for people that are part of an editorial team and like an extended network of Shum to somehow use it to connect with other writers, platforms, institutions at home and abroad, and that somehow share or that whose research topics resonate with their own. I can speak about that more later, but that's the elevator pitch.
Thank you. We noticed before that there are many things that you all or we all have in common, and one of them was already mentioned now, and this is that all the publications are written and published in English language. And but at the same time, they all aim to be global, but most of them, except of Artforum and partly Shum here, they aim to reach so-called global audience from within the regional perspective, so to say. This can be a curse and a blessing at the same time. And how do you avoid being, recolonizing yourself, since these parts of Europe where we come from or where we work are, historically semi-colonized parts of Europe, and how to decolonize the way we think about art or, humanities in general?
Hi, everyone. Well, I think when we started the magazine, we had this idea of doing it in English because we wanted to reach a wider audience, and I think it was a conscious decision. And we feel we use it as a tool rather than as a way of curating the East for the Western gaze. So it's our way of taking the power, and it's an empowering way of spreading knowledge from the place that we are coming from.
And I also like what you said before. I found it very interesting before that you said there are not a major editorial, that you don't really edit the English language, you leave it as it is, because the European language exists in many different, or global English in many different forms. Or did I understand?
Yeah. Well, I would say actually there's a lot of editing that happens, even with the consciousness to keep it minimal. But instead of it being about, correct grammar structure and this perfect grammar structure or this ideal grammar structure or whatever, it's more about the clarity of the message, right? So that can come in a lot of different ways. So yeah, it's not that there's not a lot of editing. It just happens in a different way. That yes, we emphasize clarity of concept over a kind of formal structure. And I also can add to that too that I think the way that we work as an editorial team at Blok is something that's pretty unique, and something that also works to kind of maybe counter. Less maybe decolonize, but just kind of address these maybe can be considered a decolonial practice. But there's 3 editors. We've kind of eliminated the editor-in-chief position, and instead the 3 of us, Eva, Vera, and I, work together, and we make all decisions together. About what gets published. Sometimes we're all reading the pieces that we've decided on. Sometimes one of us takes the lead, and of course we have different roles within that. But we really eliminated the hierarchy in this process.
The question was whether we can decolonialize.
In a way, why is this? Is this a sort of, if you're knocking on the global door with the concept of we are, the magazine that deals with Eastern or Central European or whatever art, is the message behind it, hey, please notice us? Or is it the message we are enough. We don't need you to notice us.
I think I would love to say no, that's not the message, but yes, for sure. A part of the idea is also to show art that's happening here and to show young and emerging artists that we think are great, that are from this region, and that we know that maybe countries in the West are not so familiar with. But also, in the case of our magazine, it is in both languages. We make it in Slovenian as well as in English, and we feel that it is important to make it in both languages for several different reasons. But of course, I mean, this is kind of a way to communicate, and essentially it gives us more freedom, you know, to also reach wider audiences and different spaces. And we also, I think, differ in the sense that we also have an exhibition program, so that after each issue we also have exhibitions with our artists. And then, of course, for us it makes a lot of sense to keep it in English and to really ensure that we can take these artists as many places as possible.
Kate, you mentioned before already that, you know, it came with a heritage of 60 years. It comes a certain baggage to the magazine, to the institution. And do you feel like that in the past years there is a vast change on how art should be written about, perceived, like, you know, or is, like, what's the how do you walk the line between the tradition of the old establishment and the new emerging world of art that is opening up?
I actually would frame the question slightly differently, because when you first posed the question about self-colonialization, I'm dealing with a perspective of how do we stop replicating certain expectations that are doing damage, even if they are the most well-minded of intentions. One of the things, for instance, this question of representation and coverage, and one of my personal goals is to expand our networks as much as possible. But I also want to make sure that we're not fetishizing difference. We're not reaching out to someone or covering a show because it communicates a certain kind of, difference, an exotic appeal. I want to make sure that we recognize that there are obvious differences in various scenes around the world. There are different ways in which people speak about art. There are different ways in which materials are used. There's different access. There's different, the panel before was about the lack of studio space. So taking these variables into consideration, we still have to have some kind of criteria or expectation. We're not going to cover this show just because it's in Kampala. We're going to cover it because there's an interesting conversation happening. But then it goes to the question of who is writing and whose voices are weighing in. And that is, in some ways, by having international in our name, it's technically Artforum International, we are setting ourselves up to lose. We really can't win. As much as I would like to try and keep finding the right writers, keep finding shows or spaces or programs that we should be paying attention to, the reality is, I'm responsible for everything outside of the US, which is not a one-person job. And even if I can find a writer, I'll be reading these blogs, I'll find a writer who I think is like, this is a voice that I really want to listen to. You'll get feedback from other people in that scene saying, well, this is really actually not the conversation being had, or this is really something that's kind of being performed exactly for those expectations of what authenticity looks like, what perspective should be heard. I don't want to close doors. I don't want to, but I don't want to open them in a way that creates another enclosure for people. We don't want to have, yes, I've never been able to write about the work that I've seen in Indonesia, for instance. It just has a lineage and a legacy that I don't feel like I have enough access to speak intelligently about. Things I find really interesting might seem more commonplace. At that same time, I wouldn't say that only an Indonesian writer can write about work from Jakarta. I don't want to make that claim either. I think it's about finding that balance so that you're not replicating patterns, but you're also, you are respecting difference without fetishizing it, basically.
Tjaša, with whom you mentioned before, it's going to be the 10-year anniversary, and it's not 60 years, but still, you went a long way, and the magazine itself, it changed a lot, didn't it? And from as a distant observer, especially in the recent years, I would say you're beyond regional in a way, that you don't, like any of these questions that we post now don't really have much to do with you, or correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I wouldn't say we're that global, but no, it's true that we started actually, when we started, we published text in Slovenian, and there was a very pragmatic reason to it. We basically didn't have enough money, and still don't, to translate the text. So at a certain point, when we started to invite people, not just from Slovenia, to write for the magazine, this question of language became important, because Slovenian language is spoken by such a small group of people, globally speaking, that basically even if you invite someone to write in Croatian, it's not necessary that younger generations of readers from Slovenia will actually, be able to understand everything. So what we encountered is a problem that, of course, English is spoken across our region, whereas even though we have our languages have Slavic roots, we don't understand each other. So we also wanted to start inviting writers from abroad. So this happened with the first issue that was more, let's say, international speaking, because it was also part of a project by Marko Pilhan that was presented in the Slovenian pavilion at the Venice Biennale, and there we had first time actually funding to be able to even invite writers such as Luciana Parisi and Mana Brata Guha and Peter Watts and so on, so big names that wrote in English, but still there was not enough funding to translate it. So with that, somehow our network grew, but we didn't have money to translate the texts back in Slovenian, so it proved more economical to just ask everyone to write in English, and we have a very good, helpful proofreader who helps, if somebody is lacking the ability to write in English that well, that helps out with the editing as well. We also started doing a series of podcasts last year, and we're continuing with that this year. And they're mostly the idea was to focus mostly on the regional context to speak with people that do practice. So if the magazine doesn't really, or the journal doesn't really write about art that much, that through the podcast we can relate the ideas from the journal to the practical aspects, or practical manifestations of those ideas in wider culture, so not just contemporary visual art or intermediate art, but also music and design and architecture and so on. And there the same problem was present, because maybe speaking in English is even harder for people, than writing in English. So I'm still trying to figure out how to solve this issue, because the conversations can't be as relaxed and fluent as with native speakers would be. Even for me, I'm not, that fluent enough to be able to have a really, exciting small talk for a podcast, So in a way, it's still an ongoing issue, but at the same time, it also helps us to even communicate within the region, not even, to the west, so just to our neighbors.
To make our panel more relaxed now, I suggest that each of you, whenever I pose a question, whenever you feel like you want to talk, you start talking, so we won't make the circles, and poor Petrică won't always have to be the first one who answers. And Tjaša, you also mentioned the magic words that there is no debate, no roundtable about magazines or arts or whatsoever without the words money and funding. And I really sort of wish that we could have an opportunity that we could just discuss ideas, but even when Hana and I were preparing, the outline of these conversations today, Hana said, yeah, maybe a question about funding would be would be something we have to ask. So
Responsibility for this.
So now that this Pandora's box is opened, please tell me how do you manage to do it? Except of one thing that we already realized before, that none of us who work as editors, for none of us is this the only full-time job that we have. So it's a sort of, except for you, Kate, congratulations, but that's a legacy, a legacy to live up to. Would you start, Katie?
Sure. And not to push this all on Hana, because we've all talked about this in our own circles like all the time. It's inescapable. And I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. It is how it is. It's our reality. For example, was the question you were asking, what are the other roles that we perform?
The question was about funding. How do you do, why do we do what we do if, just,
because we believe it's important. Literally, that's why I do it. And I think that's why my team does it, Eva and Vera and I do it, because, full disclosure, we don't get paid for this. So we don't get funding. And this is a kind of very particular position that we're in right now. Typically, we do have revenue from advertising, but it's never enough to do more than, say, pay for our contributing writers. So, it's been unpaid labor for a vast, vast, vast majority, 99.9% of the time that we've been running Blok. So if it's not important, then there's no reason to do it. And I don't have any kind of more articulate answer than that.
Maybe I can add to this. Shum is a very low-budget operation since the beginning. As I said, that it was kind of also emerged from a self-organized activities of a group of artists, writers, and curators, and theorists who were all we were all students at that time still, or just finishing studies. But I still work for free, for the journal. Mostly I don't even edit it anymore. It's just managing the platform and trying to fundraise for it, and trying to find opportunities and projects that actually would make sense for it as a whole. But when we started the first issue, we got some public funding from some student agency or something like that for these self-organized activities. But then afterwards, we were kind of if we want to continue, we need to figure out a model. So we came up with this idea of a co-production network of institutions. So we basically just went to all of the institutions we kind of knew somebody, or now asked for a meeting, even also City Gallery at that time, and they were very supportive in terms of partnering with us, being part of this co-production network that provided the initial pool of funds out of which we could pay the writers' fees. They were not high, but they were something, at least symbolic ones, proofreading and print, because our magazine is printed and also now it's published online as well. And the important part is that we don't sell it, we distribute it for free. So since then, this co-production network kind of kept us alive for, 5 years, and then after 6 years, and then after that we were able, because of the length of our, how long we were working on this, we were able to actually apply for some public funding, and we got some money from the city for that. As not from the publishing part, it is impossible for us, because of the fringe nature of the magazine, to apply for national agency for, book agency, or any kind of funding housing calls for media, like newspapers, because we don't have big enough audience, the circulation is too low, and so on. So basically, we can't compete there. But we actually get funding from cultural context as a support program for other institutions, exhibitions, and so on. And this then enabled us to start paying the editors as well. So this is basically how we get the funding, but it's not enough to, for example, cover my fee as an editor-in-chief, and Andrei's fee, who was speaking on the previous roundtable. Actually, we were one of the co-founders of the journal. So in a way, it's always a problem, especially if we don't sell it. And at a certain point, we were thinking of selling it, but we figured out that actually that would be too expensive for us, because we would need to hire an accountant, and so on. So basically, somehow for a journal that is mostly serving the community of people that is somehow attached to it or shares similar ideas, it can't really make profit and sustain itself.
Maybe just to add that this conversation is really a conversation that we're having every time with each other, because it feels like such a common thing that we are all kind of struggling with this. And for us as well, it was such an important conversation to have about unpaid labor for the people who contribute to the magazine, that in the end we've kind of settled for our labor being unpaid, essentially, at least to some extent. But yeah, for us, it's a new process for each issue. So we don't have kind of stable funding situation, but we really try to get as many people interested and supportive of each issue that is happening, and approach from companies who maybe place ads, and we do have some of those in the magazine, to public institutions, to museums. So we really try to engage each issue kind of separately. But I think I wanted to just emphasize that I think it's an important conversation to have, not just because of this very obvious thing that we are struggling with funding and that we are underpaid, but because funding opportunities are often something that dictates what the content will be. And I think that we are often kind of not talking about this. In our case, for example, we do have the magazine in 2 languages, in Slovenian as well as in English. And that is in part because we, of course, want it that way. But in part, it's also because the funding opportunities in Slovenia dictate that you need to have this, that you kind of need to have this. So I think for a lot of us, even when we were speaking in Poland with you, and we realized that, we mentioned that we were never a part, like Slovenia was never a part of these East Art Mags, for example, and was never a part of this Eastern European network. And then we realized it's because the funding that enabled East Art Mags to exist did not support Slovenia as a country. So they were kind of connected just based on this idea that they could be funded from this. Yeah.
Well, I think in our case, we got funding for the first issue from the administration of the National Cultural Fund. It's like this place where all the taxes from vice, so vice money, like cigarettes, alcohol, goes to the cultural fund, which is very interesting. And we managed to, by selling the first magazine, like the first issue, we managed to finance the next one and then the next one, and just like that. So yeah, it's interesting that our funding doesn't, they don't have any rules regarding the content. So we can publish in English, we can do whatever we want, as long as we have like this disclaimer that says that they're not responsible for the content that we publish, something like that.
But I would also add that there are some strings attached to this. Other strings. Yeah, so they have this weird Excel through which they calculate the selling price. Maybe we can show you a sample of that Excel page. It's a funny looking document. But basically what they do is they calculate the price per edition based on the amount of money that you put in, right?
Because it's a co-founding, so
it's
you
a
have to put also money from you. Yeah.
So I think that maybe the danger with this approach is that you end up having to. I mean, it's also obviously it's good partially because you can sell your stuff for free and access more audiences a bit more easily. But at the same time, there is also this process of devalorization or maybe some kind of symbolic attachment to it that this is worth only 2.5, 2.53 euro. Which is a very specific price, obviously. And I think what they're trying to do is to keep you in this kind of hook so that next year you come again and you apply again for money, and that you can't really get away from the influence of the Romanian state, which I think, again, it's not bad in itself, but you can't really become autonomous financially. And because of that, we only applied for the first issue. We started making postcards and other things that we never imagined we would do. T-shirts, tote bags. That's also fun, but do you want to spend your time selling tote bags? Maybe not so much. And we did manage to sell enough tote bags and magazines to publish the second issue, and I think building up on the future editions, we have not relied on any external funding till this issue, which is now on the table, which is also funded through the same organization. The money has run out. I think that's the sign that the peak is way behind us.
I'm not sure what's your position on workers' rights and so on, but don't you feel like whenever someone works for free or says that they can work for free, it devaluates the work itself? Don't you struggle with this idea, or you think you can be awarded in other ways than money?
But I feel like in our case, the magazine opened up so many doors. So I feel like we're very grateful for that. And we do it because we like doing it. Yeah, we are also unpaid. All the money that we earn, we put into production, design, and paying as much as we can the authors. But it also opened. I mean, we are here, and this is like a very, very good opportunity for us. And yeah,
I completely agree with you, and I also think that yes, we do talk about it constantly, and it's a big topic for us. But also, we all do it because we're very passionate about it, and for our magazine, for example, we started it as kind of a small team of a core 7 co-founders, and all of us really believe that this is a good idea and that we really want to do it, and we still believe that. And even at times it's maybe hard, but we're willing to accept that we still are super enjoying the work and are actually, very grateful that we get to be doing this. Which does sound weird in terms of your question, I suppose.
I mean, I would like to believe in a world when you can enjoy your work and get money for it. What about that concept?
Yeah, I think kind of on that note, I was going to add that I think what really normalizes it as well, too, is that so much of the labor in the art world, not only in magazines, is unpaid. So it's like unpaid or underpaid. So it's not only magazines, but it's the artist assistant. It's the artist. It's literally every position, I think, barring very, very few at the very, very top, are actually accurately paid for the hours, materials, whatever that go into creating something. But that's also, kind of an inherent problem with valuing or putting a monetary value to art anyway. I mean, that's a huge, timeless kind of question, or struggle about art and creative things, creative pursuits.
But this actually, and I'm sorry, I realize everything I keep saying is sort of on the depressing end, but speaking from Artforum, there is a misconception because in its heyday, the magazine was 80% ads, that it's a very profitable venture. This edition right here is here because we were purchased. We were bought this past December. Otherwise, we would be struggling to publish even at this level. But this what you're saying, the lack of pay, and I wish that, speaking from this magazine and this position, I wish we could say that we were very generous and paying the writers what they deserved. But I just now got a raise for my writers, for my review writers, and since that, they hadn't had a raise since the 80s. So the fee has been set. Doesn't matter where you're living in the world. It's been the same price since the 1980s. This has an enormous impact on the question of representation I mentioned earlier, because being able to do this labor of love, and I did put in my time just to get that out there, but asking people for their time and their energy and their effort, and being able to pay so little comparatively, you really do self-select who can contribute and who's in a position to write. And in some cases, the fee works out so that it's actually quite generous in certain scenes. And other scenes, I can't get anyone in Scandinavia to write for us. We have like a very distinct lack of reviews coming from Norway and Sweden, because they look at our fee and say, this won't cover the bus fare. You know, this is not, I can't do this. So those attitudes around work and labor really do shape the conversation and who's participating.
Yeah, I completely agree with this point that basically being able to work for free is a certain kind of privilege. Not that we are all privileged here, not saying that, but in a way, I ask myself, like every year when we reapply for funding, which is great that we have, but it is again too low to pay for like, not just like give a fair pay, but to pay even everything, like everyone that's involved in making the magazine. I ask myself, is this like a blessing or a curse? Is this like, if I apply the magazine to this funding and we get it, we'll have to work like this for the next 4 years. And do I have that privilege? Can I afford it myself? Like I need to work to survive on, I work as a curator otherwise, and like do other jobs, organization, production, stuff like that. And where do you take the time and energy to be able to actually continue with this? So, I mean, my position was always that the writers need to be paid, even if it's like low fee, but it was always, the budgets were very transparent to everyone who was part of the team. And who gets paid how much we got on the funding calls, how much we fundraise from the institutions and so on. But it is easier for me to, not pay myself, because still I see that, like, as you mentioned, like, I get something out of it in terms of, being able to network with it. As I said before, the magazine, because it is a low budget operation, it then needs to compensate the people in other ways, not just myself, also other people that are involved, editors and so on. So it's a tool, basically, to be able to connect and, make projects, realize something that maybe couldn't be published, realizable in more institutionalized academic contexts. So in that sense also, yes, that's why, we would love for companies or institutions to advertise in our magazine. Please, if anyone is interested, we are happy, to include your ad. But obviously, we tried that, but it's too fringe of an operation to anyone be interested, and you can't grow if you don't have funds and so on. So it's like that's a loop that you can't get out of.
It's interesting that you said this thing about 4 years and signing yourself up for another 4 years, because one of the things I think this situation creates, and this fact that we just, and I don't want to collapse this into one generation, because we're clearly not here one generation, but I do think that we, at least Artforum, has built a sort of unsustainable situation where younger generations were not providing the opportunities or the support to raise younger writers. So this, I'm curious, I don't know actually what your experiences have been in trying to develop younger voices or provide opportunities for this sort of, I don't even know where we're at right now. Is it Gen Z who is the, yeah.
I think it's very problematic also because since if there is no institutional background, that also means there is no mentoring program, that there is this vast knowledge that once maybe existed is going away because no one is there to be able to take it, not because people don't have anything to give, but because there are no jobs in which you can learn, in which you can constantly learn and continuously learn. So I think that's, but that's I think another maybe. But before I continue, I just wanted to say that since this is such a, I think, topic that many of you were probably thinking about, unpaid labor, work of passion, vocation, and things like that. If any of you feels like you want to add something, please let me know.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Kate was saying, that we actually had this conversation with the editorial team of Blok just a few weeks ago, because we had a submission from a really young writer, and it was clear that their piece needed a lot of work, and we were like, look, we can't pay them, and so maybe what we can give is actually just our support and our editorial guidance and helping them to kind of give them an opportunity to publish their work and have some support from an editorial team. So kind of it doesn't change the system, but it at least provides some access.
One of the questions that I usually find that people don't know how to answer to is the question of the dream project. It's whenever I talk to someone, they could be directors of the institutions, like rich institutions compared to what we're talking about now and so on. And whenever I say, so if you could have all the money in the world, what would be your dream project in 6 months? What would you do? And I never got an answer. So can we think beyond money? If we can work beyond money, can we think beyond money? And can you all tell me what the dream project is?
The responsibility is again on me to break the utopian dream of endless bits of money. Maybe the 60 issue would be nice, given at the level where we are with money. No, but I think it's a very tough question to answer, because I'm not sure if there is if it is possible for us to put ourselves in this position of I don't know, maybe having a team of 10, 20 authors that are hired by us. I don't know how maybe an office of writers would look like, right? I'm not sure even if we would be able to operate in those circumstances. I think
Dynamics of the magazine.
Yeah, because also we have this hybrid approach. We have half of our contributions are commissioned, half of them come through an open call. I think precisely we need this kind of diversity of voices that we don't really have access to, but rather they come to us. Maybe with money we would, I don't know, we would kind of isolate ourselves. Or I'm not sure if this will happen, but I fear for the human condition going for the worst in moments of greatness.
I don't know. I mean, it's almost, in some ways, I second your response in that, it's kind of an impossible thing to think about. In some ways, it consumes so much of our organization or our functioning that it's almost like not even a thought, if that makes any sense. That it's just it's just not something we really consider every day. We consider okay, did somebody check the emails? Did somebody, which we also talked about recently, it's really, for us, it's more about, just, we don't have the funding, but let's just keep answering emails. Let's just keep, editing and publishing, and of course we're working to change our circumstances, but there's only so much we can do for that, so we do it and just keep doing the work in the meantime, and I think that's the best we can do.
Well, no one is even daring to dream tonight. I think for us it would just be, as Tjaša was saying before, the ability to be content and know that we are going to produce, 10 more issues or whatever, or one. That, I think, would be the dream. So just to have that stability, to be able to work time-wise, wage-wise, to be able to even, print. And I think that precariousness is something that is kind of weighing down. But maybe that would be a humble dream, I guess.
Maybe I can just add also to that I think it's not even just to say we're not dreaming, I think we are, and that we actually are able to produce the kinds of work that fulfill those dreams, the kinds of work that we've done, especially in the past 2 years. I am so proud of the work that we've done at Blok, and I know my colleagues would agree that we put out really good pieces, really, really good work, and support a lot of really, diverse content. And so I think that is the dream.
You're right, yeah. Absolutely.
To work is the dream. Okay, thank you.
Here is when I can be positive, because I'm basically in the same situation. It's really easy for me. We can always do better. It's really easy for me to fixate on how we can do better and what we can do. But I can't even say what it is yet until June 1st. But there's an artist I've been following for quite some time. And there was a writer that I was helping to advocate for and develop as a young writer. And there's a 6-page feature of this writer on this artist. And it means so much to me that it's going to be there in our summer issue, that it will be out for 3 months, that people will read it and will have the same experience. Because it's not the kind of artist who courts that kind of attention. She's almost deliberately difficult to write about. So to be able to find a space to have that, that kind of work in the magazine is just, that is the privilege. It's a privilege. The last time I was in Ljubljana, in November, I went to Plečnik House, and they had this show that was Olaf Nicolai and Luca Lopento, and I spent the afternoon there, probably longer, I don't know. Blaž let me in. And the fact that I could come away from that and just say, I really want to write about this, and that there was an opportunity for me to be in that position where I could just take this indulgence and follow what I would want to do. This is not a position I've been in, my whole life. So it was, in many ways that is the dream. And yeah, of course we can keep pushing, but that's also part of the dream, is to keep pushing. I don't think I would want to be at a point where we wouldn't want to push.
How much money are we talking about? Is it unlimited?
How much do you need? Do you know how much you need?
Well, my dream is not to work. So if I had an unlimited amount of money, the final project would be to be able to enable anyone not needing to work. And then they can do, issues of magazines or whatever. So, and we don't have that, right? So basically, our journal especially, or what Shum does, is very context specific, and it goes it really reacts to conditions in which it emerges or in which it happens. And before you asked me, and I now only realized I actually didn't answer your question, I'm sorry, why we do this even though if we're underpaid. So, and I said, it's a tool for networking, and that might sound we just want to gain network career-wise, blah, blah, blah. What I meant with networking is more connecting with people that share similar interests or even, are inspiring to your own work. So for me as a curator, being in touch with people that come from theory, also theory fiction, which is what kind of we focused on in the last couple of years, and literary field as well, and other cultural fields. It brings something to my work as well. So, if you can find a community of people that are not your friends, but are somehow like your relatives, or you feel related to them somehow through the ideas that you're excited about, this is something why, like, I every time then decide, okay, we're gonna apply again, and gonna work for next year, so somehow I hope that this is how also other colleagues from SHUM see the journal. So each issue is actually a project of people that are editing it. We're not, a medium that would benefit the society or give news, or whatever, or report on something. It's more like, being able to have like some network, some small funding, and being able to realize something that could be shared with other people and that are excited about the same things.
It's like community instead of audience, or?
Yes, exactly.
Does anyone from the audience is here? Our community audience.
Hi, I'm Felicitas, and I have a dream. I have the dream that society provides the structure for art workers and creative people, writers and critics. It should be provided in a way on eye level with all the other, issues of capitalist system, because artwork or art practice is, I think, crucial for, as we all know, for democratic society. So I think it's a political and structure question. And this has been to solve. This would be my dream. But thank you very much for this panel. It was really great.
Hi, I'm Boris from Bratislava and Vienna. And I have kind of, a provocative wish of you, because you speak about your structure, like your job. And long story short, there is this publishing house which is called Naum Books. It's based in Brooklyn, and it was founded by a group of philosophers and artists. This publishing house publishes only apocrypha, so it's 100% clandestine society, and it rised out of fear of academic writers and artists in terms of demands of their publishers in style and also content. So, I don't know, example like Ray Brassier, there is some expectation of what and how he will write. And also he has a stable job at academy, but he has loads of dangerous thoughts. And this has to be made for free. It has to be amateur, which comes from amare, love. Huh? So speak about your authors a bit more than about yourself. Like, what is your relation to authors? Like, what is the philosophical, aesthetical priority? Even Artforum, because you have a methods of selection, like how you select things. I'm very curious about that.
Thank you very much. I like how there is, sorry for this description in advance, but a man comes and talks about concepts, whereas we more or less younger women were before discussing finances. And I'm so happy you opened up this. So please, let's talk about the philosophical concepts or artistic concepts that are behind your work. And I'm sorry we didn't talk about that before. Tjaša, can you start now?
Okay, I will start. So first of all, I mentioned before, for like a couple of years now, or maybe 2 years, I'm not editing the journal anymore. So basically, concept-wise, I'm the one who collaborates or invites collaborators that have interesting research that I think is relevant somehow for what's happening in contemporary art, even though the journals don't write about contemporary art. I also, that's somehow like concepts that in the last years Shum focused on were connected to theories and positions that maybe are underrepresented in the local context, or especially not that present in the academic. I mean, they don't emerge necessarily in the academic sphere, but mostly on the internet. So we also published a lot of, we always give writers the opportunity to, or kind of encourage them to experiment with writing. So the journal was renamed sometime in, like, I don't know, a couple of years back, from Journal for Contemporary Art Criticism and Theory into Journal for Contemporary Art and Theory Fiction. And this is also one of the, let's say, focuses or approaches that we try to follow. I mean, theory fiction is quite a, not really clear what that means in terms of, it's not really a genre, but it does originate in the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit's work in the Warwick's University that was operating in the 90s. A lot of theorists and philosophers that are still active and relevant and present in contemporary art discourse as well emerged or came out of that school. So Luciana Parisi that I already mentioned, Kodwo Eshun, infamous Nick Land, of course, as well, Sadie Plant, and many more that now I can't really list all of them. But these kind of theories were important at a certain point for how Shum reoriented its focus, and that happened also in reaction or somehow in response to a certain mainstream discourse on contemporary art in Slovenia. So it is, as I said, a very context-specific issue. So, but as an editor-in-chief, I mean, if we would want to speak about specific issues or specific theories and positions that the issues represented, and they change through time together with the editors of the journal, we would need to ask, actually it would be fair to speak with the editors. But I would say that in that sense, this is somehow the focuses that we were following in the last couple of years, and always trying to think how to bring certain ideas that are maybe already circulating abroad into the local and regional context, and what that means also for contemporary art production that happens here. But we also published a lot of, we published literary pieces, basically short stories. Everything we publish is commissioned. And in the last years, we also started to connect the topics with certain exhibition projects of institutions we collaborate with. Of course, a lot of that also has to do with my work. If I have an opportunity to curate something, then I also say, hey, there's also Shum Journal, and we have great editors, and they can edit an issue that serves as a reader and not a catalog for the show. So mostly it's expanding on certain ideas or topics that a show or an exhibition project even if it's curated by someone else, of course, deals with. So, that's what maybe, if I don't go in too concretely into each piece.
Our Artforum, we're actually writer-led, which means I don't commission in the same sense of, I don't say, oh, would you like to write about this show? Everything comes from conversations with the writers. I would say 90% of my job is just emails. We have 600 writers on my roster, and I just am trying to keep up with things that they're looking at, artists they want to write about, kinds of things that might interest them. Occasionally I'll say, hey, have you seen this show? Just because I think it might be a good match for someone, or the kinds of pieces that they've been trying to write or wanting to write. But it really is just about sort of listening and figuring out how we can accommodate or put things forward. We did have a space for more experimental writing in Book Forum, and it kills me that Book Forum is not on the table at the moment, which it was never going to be profitable, but it was always that labor of love. But it was really for the writers, because as writers kept pitching, so much of the conversation shifted to what people were reading. So hopefully we'll find a space and a way to bring back some of that writing as well.
For us, it's a kind of a two-part process. One part is the curatorial part, which is led by Lara Meac and Aidana Kucutar and our guest curator, Lara Reichmann. They are the ones in charge of finding artists, and usually this happens a lot in conversation, also with very different people that we are in contact with. And I'm in charge of the text mostly. And here, yes, we do commission. We ask on purpose very different people to write about a certain common issue. We've had, for example, in both issues, writers who work with Schum as well, or we had, writers from the national radio and television. What matters is that the voices are different, that it's usually writers who are young and I won't say emerging, but who somehow we feel that they have a fresh voice and a fresh perspective, and that essentially connect in a common topic. And this, to me, feels like a very good process of then bringing everyone together, both from Slovenia and from abroad, and just try to see what happens when you mix voices that are completely different.
Can I add something, because I forgot? This is important. So yes, we don't publish the big names that I mentioned. These are mostly like the positions that kind of influence the focus of Schum, for example. But we publish a lot of writers that are also unknown, also some that we don't even know their real names. So, editors just follow the internet flows and find something interesting and contact the person, and they're willing to write because they had some interesting position on a certain blog or something like that, and they're willing to write for us, and we never learn who this person actually is. So also we had this kind of situation. So we're always somehow trying to look for things that are not necessarily already in the spotlight, and including a lot of younger generation of people. I mean, I'm getting older, obviously, so people that I work with are, I think it's important to give the platform to younger generations. So also the current editors are Max Valencic and Tisa Trocha, and Andrej Škufca is co-founder as well, and they shape the editorial focus as they wish. I mean, in terms of, I kind of try to connect it topically with certain exhibition opportunities, which is also a pragmatic thing, just to keep this low budget operation running, but at the same time, how they approach this topic, who they will choose for writers is basically really like, what they're interested in and what's their research.
Gonna jump through here, but I think the analogy with curating is pretty spot on, because so many writers have that folder on their desktop that are just all of these drafts that they want to write. So it's about figuring out the conditions and how to get them to that point with those pieces.
Yeah. So we, let's see. I think it's important to mention that we, for a long time when Blok first started, for the first kind of half of its lifetime so far, many people thought we were a Czech magazine. Nothing wrong with this, but it was very important for us and the current editorial team to really reframe that and no, we are, physically the three of us are based in Warsaw, but we cover the region and we really want to make sure we represent the region, as best as we can. So one thing that we is really important for us is that to give space to as many different places and people as possible. We really try to give, if we cover an exhibition at a gallery, we really try to make sure there's at least a year until we cover that space again, or the artist, or just to give enough room, because it's a really big region. In addition to just kind of like thinking about what's functioning in this time and place, like we really try and be flexible. Also, like maybe there's Polish artists doing something in Canada or whatever, you know, like if there's some kind of regional connection, we want to be flexible with how we think about that. And then also like when we're going through submissions, most of the work that we publish comes from submissions. We published an eyewitness section, which is basically purely exhibition submissions. So it's like the curatorial statement and then images from the opening, the exhibition. But we don't have any intervention in those. And so then the texts that we work with the writers on, of course, we want to make sure that we have a broad range of what we cover conceptually and geographically. And of course, it also comes down to these other jobs that we have as people, like, and the interests that we have in the art world as people. And so a lot of those, the things that we're saying, oh, actually, I saw this really interesting show here. We should find somebody to cover this if possible, or if we can't, then one of us tries to do it. And when we're making these decisions, I think it also comes down to like, is this show getting a lot of coverage or not? And if it is, then we know that somebody else will take care of it. If it's not, then, you know, it becomes something that we maybe take more of an active role in.
I think in our case, as we said before, it's more of a hybrid. We also have submissions. We have an open call. So each issue has a theme, and I think that helps a lot to bring together people that have the same interests. So we have an open call, but we also have we ask people that we know that want to write or to publish their photo projects. So I think that's how we do it. And I think having a theme for each issue is very helpful in like bringing together everyone.
But I would add, in addition to the methods of selection, of selecting authors, what we find particularly maybe more interesting on a personal level would be how we select the topics for the issues, because we like to have, as Laura said, a specific topic per each issue. So we try to maybe find some kind of evocative concepts that we would like to call them both timely and timeless. Timely in the sense that they pertain to the current socio-political, cultural realities of the region that we try to represent. But timeless also because we try to frame them in a way that they almost have some kind of archival value, that you can browse through them at a later date, and you can still see them as a a capsule of meaning that still makes sense in the future. So maybe, in the first issue came in this context of the migrant crisis. So we focused on communities. The second issue, we were commemorating 50 years since the Prague 68 event. So we tried to maybe see how this notion of utopia can be used to maybe reevaluate the Eastern European condition, maybe see whether it has a future, whether we can reposition ourselves in relation to this kind of radical imagination or utopianism. The third one, 1989 to 2019, so 3 decades of post-socialism. So we thought these were 3 decades of struggle, of coming to terms with the past, of maybe also, coming to terms with the present, because it's also the result of angst and maybe even discontent with how things are going for us as a society. So we always try to find to extract these concepts that we find both relatable and maybe to lack the temporality.
Yes. Yes, we do.
You mean like Right. Oh, no, actually, I don't. I mean, the issues are very. We publish 5 to 6 text per issue, and it's published twice a year. So I think it's more meaningful to, invite people. I mean, I don't want to occupy the space with my text. I mean, when I was editing them, I also did the editorial, usually a short one, but no. But some of the editors do write because they are also, writers themselves. I mean, I do write about art, but very occasionally, let's say, for exhibition catalogs and stuff like that. So.
Thank you very much. I suggest we continue the conversation about everything that has to do with the magazine or doesn't have to do with the magazine later with a glass of wine or a drink of your choice. I would like to thank Ljubljana Art Weekend for hosting us and Cukrarna. I didn't say much about the magazine that I mentioned, that I did. This is Cukr, which is published in Slovene language, so we don't have this thing in common, and what we also don't have in common is that Cukr has institutional support, so thanks Cukrarna for that. And I wish you all the projects of your dreams and labor of love. Good luck to you all and good night.